re-scramble a history, but it seems to be a very direct set of events that worked upon and built upon each other. Yes, sir.
What is the status of the awakening at this time?
What is the status of the awakening at this time?
Well, the awakening, I mean, the Iraqi government is now in charge of the they call it the file or the program. Basically what had happened is in Anbar, okay, when we were recruiting these tribal people, okay, there's a misunderstanding thing. People think that we just started arming and paying tribes, to come just wear police uniforms. It was all done under the Ministry of Interior. The U.S. was the one who vetted the recruits to join the Ministry of Interior. Since Anbar was a no man's land, it was a ghost town, you didn't have any government offices there. The only people you had there were American soldiers and Marines. And so the Ministry of Interior said, if you get recruits, send them to Jordan to our training camps, give us their names, and if you think that they have a clear past, we'll hire them, and they'll be able to get weapons from us and through you, and we'll be able to give you the money to hand out their salaries. So up until December, almost in January 2007, all of these recruits were all Ministry of Interior recruits. Okay, this wasn't Americans paying tribal people and arming them. What became known as the Sons of Iraq program is when General Petraeus, as Sunnis saw the success of what was going on in Anbar, they wanted the exact same thing in their areas. And so they had mixed areas in Baghdad and some of these other troubled areas of Iraq, but you already had police forces there that were Shia, and it became a sectarian, a religious struggle. And so the government of Iraq, while it was very supportive, okay, politically of what was going on in Anbar, because it's all Sunnis, okay, Al-Qaeda's base is in Anbar, Al-Qaeda's Sunni, if they want to kill Al-Qaeda, that's great. It doesn't affect us, okay? But if they want to do that in our areas that affect our political constituents, that's a problem. So the government of Iraq said, sorry, Petraeus, I'm not going to hire these guys. Well, Petraeus says, okay, well, I am then. And so Petraeus hired them with U.S. money. Okay, these are the Sons of Iraq. So when it comes to, well, what's the fate of the awakening today, it's important to distinguish between what's Anbar with the awakening, because they're already part of the Ministry of Interior, and what was this Sons of Iraq program, because these people that joined the Sons of Iraq program were assuming, well, the people in Anbar are receiving money from the Americans, so we will too. It was a false assumption. But today, now that the government of Iraq has it, they aren't too keen on letting these people join the ministries, security ministries, but they still are paying their salaries. It's still an issue that's going to, take a while to iron out. But it's basically it basically is over. These people are still receiving modest salaries from the government, but the government's still trying to find a place for them and just hoping that it dies out and they find jobs in other areas.
And I think there's one other thing too. When you think of some of these programs, it wasn't just police forces or security personnel. There was also Ramadi didn't have a mayor, like Sterling said. Literally in Ramadi, you had one government official at the time, and that was the governor. There were no other provincial councilmen, nothing. The Marines would run the governor from his house to the government center, and that was it. There was no one to work with. There was no mayor. Once the awakening was instrumental, and say, we'd go to the awakening and say, look, we need a mayor of Ramadi. We need civilians now to start helping us develop institutions, sewage, water, education. These type of things when there was no formal Iraqi government presence there. The awakening stepped in to start helping get some of those people to us so we could start working those programs. And some of those, I think, and certainly you probably know better than I do, some of those individuals may still be in some of these jobs or had transitioned or maybe had gone back to working farms or whatever they did prior to that.
The headline in the New York Times today is CIA on the ground in Libya. And by the way, my source for what I'm about to say is none of the people in this room. But what happened in Anbar province is an intriguing success story of the Central Intelligence Agency. If I understand the story, I may not. I may know 1% of it, and it may be wrong. But I'll tell you what I think I know. You know, we often read about the CIA's disasters over the years. In Anbar province, they had been working with sheikhs on and off in Jordan, in Baghdad, and in Anbar province since before the war began. The CIA moved in and threw money around strategically at key points with key people. That's what they do often. They were working behind the scenes and, in my opinion, helped set the stage or shape the battlefield. In fact, the very first Sons of Iraq or Neighborhood Watch program by Sunni tribal fighters was as early as 2005 as a pilot project of the CIA with a small tribe in Ramadi. And in fact, in 2006, the Ramadi station chief of the Central Intelligence Agency did something very important. He sent a cable up the line of the chain of command saying something huge is happening in Ramadi. It's a game changer, and it's huge. Now, that cable bounced around Washington, Langley, Virginia, into the White House, and it helped change the opinion of American civilian policymakers that, hey, something huge is happening here. It wasn't just the military making that report. Interesting case study. And the other thing I want to talk about, tell you briefly about, was Travis Patriquin's views on Islam. Today, you can't pick up a paper without reading about anti-Islam violence or you know, people arguing this, that, and the other thing about Islam. Travis Patriquin studied the Quran in its original Arabic, so he wouldn't misunderstand it due to mistranslations and so forth over the years. He was an Islamic history buff. He was a self-taught Islamic history scholar. And he told Sunni sheikhs in Anbar province in closed-door meetings, sitting around the buffet, he said, listen, these people aren't Muslims, Al-Qaeda. That's the point. They're not Muslims. They say they are, but they're using that for their own twisted purposes. And he had a very tolerant, very enlightened view of true, authentic, moderate Islam. And I think that some of this is in my book, and I think that his views on that we can all learn a lot from, and they opened up my eyes a great deal on the subject of Islam. Questions? Yes, ma'am. Well, of course, there was an insurgency from day one, and it was, right. Right. The question is, the point is there was no Al-Qaeda originally at the time of the invasion. As I understand it, and you fellows can expand on this, 2004 was the key year when foreign-led Al-Qaeda figures like Abu Musab al-Zarqawi moved in and started taking over domestic insurgents, or trying to amalgamate them all under the Al-Qaeda banner. That led to conflict, as Sterling said, and eventually a big split where the reconcilable insurgents, many of them, flipped to our side.
Yeah, just the 1 minute version. I've talked with Al-Qaeda members that worked in Afghanistan in the late 80s. I mean, they weren't Al-Qaeda then, you know, but they had fought against the Soviets, and they were Iraqis. That's right. And part of our justification for going for Iraq was that there was intelligence that Zarqawi was in Kurdistan with some of these Kurdish mujahideen fighters, you know, and was planning things in Iraq and working with the Iraqi government to do that. Now, the reports come out that wasn't really true. But it was true that Ansar al-Islam, which is a Kurdish jihadist group that had fought in Afghanistan in the mid-90s, came into Kurdistan because of conflict that was going in Afghanistan. So when the U.S. went to Afghanistan, you had some of these Arabs and Iraqi and Kurdish fighters that looked for safe havens. And one of the places where they went was northern Iraq, where Kurdistan is. And so they thought the U.S. is going to go for Iraq. It sounds like the U.S. is going to go for Iraq because if they're going to hit a place, it's going to be Saddam Hussein. So when the U.S. did invade, they had assessed that Sunnis are going to feel vulnerable because the security institutions are going to fall. They were the only really established institution that could give guidance. And even though it wasn't Al-Qaeda, it's just affiliates. You know, Zarqawi made the Tawhid and Jihad. And these Arabs, Iraqis that had been in Afghanistan and worked with the Mujahideen in the 80s, okay, said they were the first ones to turn against Zarqawi because they're like, look, in Afghanistan, none of the Arabs did their own project. We worked under the Afghanis, okay? We didn't do our own thing. But if we get the Arabs involved in leadership, Arab fighters, come. They say, ahlan wa sahlan, you're welcome. Come, help us get rid of the occupier, okay? But don't try to you know, lead our resistance. Well, the Iraqis that were Salafists that wanted to fight the Americans, you know, with weapons, that hadn't fought in Afghanistan were a lot more vulnerable to the Arabs because they were getting a lot more financial support from outside. They get a lot more media attention, and so it just they took the banner of resistance, and after the first Fallujah, they basically took the attention, and that gave them more of a base in Iraq.
Yes, ma'am. The question was first a tribute to the inspiring story of Travis Patriquin's, and it was directed toward Travis's parents in the room here. And also, the question was the impact of all this on Sunni-Shia relations and what it was all aimed at. My only comment really is that the point of all this, the point of the awakening from the American point of view and the point of the surge from the American point of view was to buy time, stop the killing, stop the flowing of blood long enough so that political institutions could start developing in Iraq. So there could be some reconciliation and durable national political institutions. Now, the fighting stopped, the blood stopped flowing to a large extent, and of course, the politics got stuck. The politics were largely paralyzed for the next couple of years. As of today,